everyone being here. And this is just an opportunity for you to learn about what's going on in the city of Capitola. So thanks again. I'm going to turn this over to Jamie, who will answer Chloe's question about the pandemic response and vaccine.
Thank you, Mayor Brooks. Yeah, so I just wanted to touch quickly on where we are with the pandemic. I know most people follow along with this at home, so I won't regurgitate too much information that you may already have. I think the big picture is that we are doing so much better than we were a month ago. Our case numbers here locally and in the state of California have fallen really dramatically since mid-January. I'm not sure what everyone did, but keep doing it. Please, everybody, wear your mask, follow the rules, but we're doing a great job here and we're on a great trend. I also want to note we remain in the purple tier, which is the most restrictive tier in California's system for what businesses can be open and closed. I am somewhat hopeful that we may see some movement out of that in the next couple of weeks. They rank what tier you go in, the state does, based on your number of cases per 100,000 population in a county. We're hovering around, I want to say around 13, 14 cases per 100,000 over the last week. If we can get down to 7, that gets us out of the purple tier. By way of reference, at sort of the low point, we were almost 70 cases per 100,000 in early January. So we've made a lot of progress since then. In addition, I just want to share with you that the vaccine news is going well. Our county, not without hiccups, I think, in the vaccine rollout, but in terms of the overall numbers, we're doing quite well for a county of our size. I've seen that over, I believe it was 20%, Chloe, is that correct? Of the county had received first shots, and I think 70,000 shots overall have been administered in this county. So we're on our way. I think once we start to get, over the 50% mark in the county, we can start to hopefully start to see things maybe moving a little bit more closer back to normal. That's coupled with the immunity conferred from the vaccines, plus the number of people in the county who've actually already gotten the virus. So fingers crossed that this spring and summer are going to start to look a lot better as we move forward. Is there anything else I missed about COVID? I think that was it.
No, and I guess what I would just add is that to your point about things maybe looking different towards the summer or as we move through the year, is that that's kind of our intent, is to plan for that, to plan for us moving out of the pandemic and seeing our community become inoculated with the vaccine, and just really that's what we're planning on doing here in the city. Also, I wanted to add that the mayors meet with the county public health department on a weekly basis. We've decided as a group that it's important for all of us to meet to gain that information, and as soon as we gain that information, we will post it or send it out if it hasn't been done so by the county department already. So we're trying to stay up to date as much as all of you are. So but thank you for wearing your masks and social distancing and just staying vigilant during this really challenging time for everyone.
That did remind me of one other thing that I really did want to mention is that we are now in phase 1B in our county of the state's vaccination distribution plan, which means that everybody 65 and up, and then who's working in childcare, emergency services, and maybe one other profession is now eligible to food, yes, is now eligible to get a vaccine. So I would encourage everybody who's in one of those professions to start looking. If you need information about how to get a vaccine, the county has a pretty good website up with all of the different ways in which people can get vaccines. And we have a link to it. So if you go to our City of Capitola website, we're going to get a link to the county's vaccine sort of central repository info page to help guide you there. I don't know if we have that up quite yet, but if we don't, you can also get it from the county's information page as well.
Yes. Thank you, City Manager. We have our COVID-19 update page always available right from the homepage, and we'll have a direct link to vaccine information very shortly. So thank you both for that update. We wanted to shift gears slightly to a exciting project, and I'll ask the mayor to just briefly touch on the Wristband Park project.
Yeah, thank you, Chloe. So I am happy to report that probably let's see, 10, 20, 3 decades later, the city of Capitola has finally approved the conceptual park design for the Wristband Mansion. So what does that mean? Just to give you some kind of fun facts that staff shared with me, that in 1921, the Wristband Mansion was built. So, and I cut and pasted these, so if they're wrong, you can blame these other two who are here tonight. So 1921 was when Wristband Mansion was built, and in 1985 is when the city of Capitola ultimately purchased the mansion for $1.35 million. Since 1985, there's been multiple transgressions of and recommendations of what should take place. Unfortunately, there was a big fire that nearly pretty much gutted the Wristband Mansion itself. And in 2010, the city council approved the demolition of the mansion. However, in 2011, a developer proposed a 2-phase restoration to be funded in part by the city of Capitola. Then in 2012, the mansion roof was rebuilt, doors and windows were sealed, and the structure was mothballed. I had no idea what mothballed meant. So that just means it was shut down and it was no longer accessible by the public, and folks could not enter it. So then the good news was in 2014, the city of Capitola received a grant to develop the land around the mansion as a park. And Mr. Michael Arnon is the landscape architect who ultimately helped design the conceptual park design plan. Then in 2020, the city sought additional grant funding to finish the park, and eventually, ultimately approved receiving these grant dollars, and finally now approving the conceptual park design. So it has been a very long time coming of getting us from then to now, there to now. I'm excited. I think that it's the design plan is gorgeous. It's going to be a beautiful park for folks to visit, beautiful garden. There's going to be space for children to play. There has been some political energy around the name of Wristband Park that's come up. And at our last city council, we asked staff to come back to city council with some background on whether the name had any issues around it, or if they could offer some more historical background on the name itself. So we'll be hearing from staff in the next coming months on that, but it did not stop the plans from occurring. It was just at that time, I think it was our due diligence to make sure we were heading in the right direction in terms of what we were naming it, or what we are naming it. So I appreciate everyone's input on that matter, because I think it's really important that we learn more about the history of Capitola and the folks who've lived here. I don't know, Jamie, if you wanted to add anything to Wristband.
You know, I don't. I guess the only detail I would add is that we did just submit a grant application to hopefully fully fund the park renovation project. Did you touch on that already?
I said it briefly, but no, that's how we're able to actually be where we are today. That's why council approved the conceptual review, because of this grant. It's very exciting.
Yeah, and we'll be finding out later this year whether or not we get it awarded. If we don't get the grant awarded, we're going to still be looking for funding for the park project. But we have creative folks on staff, and so I hope we'll be able to come up with a plan to get the project done.
Yes, it's going to be beautiful. There was so much time and energy that's been put into it. It's gorgeous, and thank you to Mr. Michael Arnon for really listening to our community during all of this, and putting all those pieces together. It's gorgeous.
Something I'm really excited about myself, and that brings us to our next question, something I'm even more personally excited about. If our city manager could touch on the new Capitola Branch Library project.
So the Capitola Library project is another one of these really long-term projects. I mean, I think that the city has been talking about building a permanent library for more than 20 years. It may even be longer than that. I don't know. I know that my involvement in the effort started probably back when I first became city manager. And I knew that at that point we had an agreement set out with the county that said we were going to build a library and start construction by 2020. and we were setting aside some old redevelopment agency funds to make it happen. And just because nothing is ever easy in Capitola, the first thing that I did as city manager, one of the first things is we commissioned a study to find out how big the new library needed to be, right? Needed to build a library. We needed to figure out how big it was supposed to be. And the answer that we got back was it needs to be 13 to 14,000 square feet, and it's going to cost $8 million, and you only have $2 to $3 million. And from there, the project only got easier. So we ended up at that point kind of shelving the plans and going back and working with the other cities in the county. And we ended up passing a tax, countywide tax, Measure S. You may remember that from 2016, which got the city actually $10 million towards the library project. So that money, coupled with the other money that we previously had set aside for our old redevelopment agency, was really the seed money that got the project going. We started construction back in 2019, and almost as soon as we got into construction, we hit a snag, and it had to do with the power lines. For those of you who haven't heard this story, the power lines were too close to the building, or maybe more accurately, the building was too close to the power lines. So that took almost a year to work out. So it slowed our project down by almost a year. Not because of anything city did internally, but because of just working out how, when you have a building that's going up too close to power lines, believe me, it's not an easy thing to fix. And PG&E, they have a lot of priorities, if you haven't noticed, with all of their challenges around the state. So it was quite an effort to get that fixed, but we finally gotten it fixed. And we think that we're going to be able to have the building ready to be open in June this year. Now, whether or not the tier that we're in with COVID will let us open it in June, that remains to be seen, but it's going to be the most amazing building. I've gotten tours of it while it's under construction, and it's just going to be a really beautiful space that I think the whole community can be proud of. So really looking forward to that. A lot of people before me did a lot of work. A lot of other people within the city have done a lot of work, and it's going to be a real credit to the city, I think, when this thing is done.
And can you just imagine how great it's going to be able to walk from the park to the library and back and forth? It's just going to be such a special place for our residents and our families to visit. I'm so excited about both of these projects.
Yeah, they're going to be really wonderful. I mean, I think for those of you who haven't been up to the Felton Library and you want a little bit of a preview of the look and feel of the Capitola branch, the Felton branch is a brand new branch that was completed just a couple of years ago. And if you're able to get inside, which I don't know how easy it is right now with the COVID restrictions, it's just, the architects are able to do such wonderful things with new libraries, really creating great spaces I think we can all be proud of.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Mayor Brooks, can you talk a little bit about the Capitola Mall project?
Absolutely. There was so much excitement back in 2020 when the new owners of the Capitola Mall, or one of the pieces of Capitola Mall, went to, I think it was at Sears, to hold that community forum. We had, I think, close to 300 people attend that meeting, maybe 200, but we had a huge turnout, and there was so much momentum and excitement around what was going on with the mall. And unfortunately, the pandemic happened, right? And we tried to move forward. We tried to keep that momentum going. But at this time, I think it was just in the summer, right, that Jamie, that the new approach was we kind of just need to put our pencils down and reevaluate what's going on. As you know, I think it was all over the paper yesterday about the big movie theater in downtown Santa Cruz closing down, and there was a movie theater sketched in our plans, or the conceptual plan with the mall. And so it's only understandable that the developers are looking at or re-looking at what's in their plans. So at this point, I think this is a good opportunity for us to also reevaluate where we are with the mall development project. But needless to say, things are still happening. Things are still being talked about. They're still evaluating the process. One interesting informational fact here, if folks don't know, that the new developers do not ultimately own the whole mall. You know, they don't own everything. It's actually pieced out into 6 different parcels, meaning like Target is their own owner and Macy's is another owner and Olive Garden. And so as Merlone Geyer continues to look at the plans for the development project, they have to work with all of these partners. And as we see changes in the economy and what stores are looking like, and now the unfortunate piece of the like movie theaters, they have a little bit more work ahead of them. But we hope they come to us soon with some more information, and that soon we'll be hearing. Hopefully, we'll soon be hearing from them about where they're at. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Jamie?
No, I think the only other thing I would add is you know, the city remains in regular communication with Merlone Geyer representatives. They reiterate the fact that they're committed to the space. You know, they're more than $100 million invested into it at this point. And they didn't buy it to just manage it as it is. You know, their intent was to redevelop it. And you know, they have experience with these kinds of development projects and they understand the timelines involved. So they're not, I don't get the impression, which I don't know that they would share that with me, but I don't get the impression that they're looking to pull out. So it's been unfortunate, the timing of the pandemic, obviously. You know, I think a lot of people were getting pretty excited about seeing the mall project happen. But, you know, maybe the silver lining is that ultimately it's a better project at the end because it's, you know, there's more time to kind of reflect on what the uses are going to be for that space for the next 20 years.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You know, something that I feel really strongly about is the workforce housing, affordable housing element of the development project. And so what we do know is that it's a multi-use project, meaning that there would be stores and housing and some sort of form of entertainment and ideally a hotel. And so you know, for me, this gives me a better opportunity to look into different ways we can include affordable housing in the development project itself and work with community members and community organizations on how we can actually make that come to fruition. So there's some downfall to it, but there's also, like I mentioned, some opportunity here with new time that we've been able to come out on the other end with. So hopefully, like I said, things will happen soon enough where we can hear from them.
Chloe, I think you're a little bit muted.
I'm muted. And
Yeah.
I said, excuse me, I'm muted as I was muted. So thank you for your patience. Our last project-based question, if you could touch on the Wharf city manager, please.
Yeah, so the Capitola Wharf project is another exciting one. You may recall that we passed Measure F here locally in Capitola, which was a funding, a sales tax, 10-year sales tax that was intended to help support renovations and improvements to the beach, to help maintain the beach in the face of winter storms and rising seas and all the challenges of maintaining infrastructure on the beach. We were able to get the first parts of that project done recently. We rebuilt the jetty. The jetty is that rock piles that extend right out from the bandstand. What that does is that helps capture sand, because without it, since the harbor was built in the 70s, we wouldn't have a beach. So the jetty is really important for us to actually have a beach in Capitola, and it hadn't been touched, I want to say, in 40 or 50 years. So that renovation project we got done relatively recently. We're also out there on the beach right now, I think, working on the flume. The flume is that weird concrete structure that you see in the wintertime exposed on the beach, the long linear thing. And what that does is that in the summer conveys the water from the lagoon, from SoCal Creek, under the sand to the ocean. And the purpose behind that is it helps recreate the natural condition of the creek, where the creek would have naturally dammed up in the summer and then sort of percolated through the beach, but it would have been a much wider beach, much more area. And given the development that's taken place, where we have the Esplanade restaurants on one side and the Venetian on the other, there isn't that room to have a naturally occurring creek. So the flume actually lets us recreate that natural condition. And it's actually viewed as a bit of a model by a lot of the various wildlife permitting agencies, because it does allow us to manage and actually recreate the natural lagoon cycle. So we're rebuilding the flume right now, and then the really big project is going to be the wharf. And the wharf, the key behind it is that number one is the wharf takes a beating. Everybody knows this. In the waves every year, we lose pilings. And one of the things we've noticed is that from the end of Wharf Road to kind of about where the boat and bait shop is, there's only the wharf is only 3 piles wide. And so that means if one of those piles gets knocked out, it can actually close our wharf for a significant amount of time. So what we'd like to do is to try to make the wharf more resilient, makes it stronger so it's not as likely to have to close in storms. And so our plans are to widen, we call that the trestle, the portion of the wharf that goes from the end of Wharf Road out to the boat and bait shop, try to widen that, get more pilings out there so that the whole wharf is stronger and less likely to close. Then in addition, we're going to redeck the whole wharf. The top of that deck is now pretty old and starting to really show its age. And then also look at rebuilding some restrooms and some other great amenities out there on the wharf. In addition to the Measure F funding that we approved locally, we were also able to get $1.9 million from the state of California through a partnership with Mark Stone's office. We were actually able to work that into the budget a couple of years ago with the state of California. So we're really able to leverage our funding to help improve the wharf. So our goal is to have all of the permits in hand by June. And then we need to figure out the financing plan, how we're going to finance what the construction is going to cost. And then I think we're hoping to build it next fall, winter. So hopefully by this time next year, we're either looking at a wharf in construction or a wharf renovated.
That's wonderful. I think we can move forward and ask the mayor to talk a little bit about economic development. And I see here there might be some information about our CDBG grants for local businesses.
Yeah, I'm so happy I muted myself at that point because my 6-year-old just ran in and said, "Mama," really loud. "Can I have a sweet?" So I'm really glad that was muted, but I had to share it anyways because it was really funny. So I just wanted to highlight all of the activity, all the big projects that are taking place in Capitola. It feels like I've been lucky enough to come in during this time as mayor just to see them all finally come to fruition, or at least somewhat. You know, we're on the cusp of us completing or beginning the groundbreaking for so many of these, and so it's just a really great time to be part of council. As we swing into economic development, as many of you know, the city unfortunately had to make huge cuts to our budget because of the pandemic in preparation of, really what was going on. And we had to make about a little over $4.6 million we cut from deficit, from our budget. And one of those things that we had to cut was our community grants program. And that was really hard for our council to entirely cut because those were the dollars that would go to our nonprofits. And the state, I think, recognized that many cities were having to make the same decisions, which left a lot of folks, especially those in need, without food, without utilities, without being able to pay their rent and so forth. And so what the state did real close after, I think it was March 15th when we went into the shutdown. So on March 27th of 2020, Congress passed the Corona Aid Relief and Economic Security Act, also known as the CARES Act. And what came out of that was a program called the CDBG CV Grant Program. And our city was allocated a certain amount or 2 rounds of funding, one that we've already been able to distribute. And what we decided as a council was to distribute that to rental assistance through the Community Action Board. And we're only allowed 3 others. And so we focused the dollars to Community Bridges, Meals on Wheels, Gray Bears, and Second Harvest Food Bank. And we were able to fund those organizations directly with the CDBG CV grant dollars. The second round has also was just newly allocated to the city, and on the January 28th meeting, City Council decided, and I should say it's really restricted. These dollars can't just be used on anything. There's really clear rules and regulations that it needs to be spent in relation to those in need who are directly affected by the COVID, the pandemic itself, as well as low. I'm trying to look for the right language here, but it's for low income families or folks who fall within a certain criteria. And so based on that information, we as a council decided that the second round of funding would be distributed to $15,000 to each of those three organizations that we did the first time. But the chunk of the money would now be offered to our businesses as we want to call them grants. We're still working on the language there, but that there will be approximately $7,500 grants, if you will, to support low income people who are working, or owners, to pay their rent and their utilities. And so we'll be able to roll that out pretty soon here. The biggest catch is that it takes a lot of time and energy and paperwork to administer all of this money out to the community. And I wanted to highlight this organization who has generously offered to waive their administrative costs to the city. This is the Santa Cruz Small Business Development Center. With their new partnership, the city will be able to fund an additional 7 grants because we don't have to spend money on administrative costs with another organization because they're not charging us. We're able to offer more grants out to our community. So I'm just really excited that they've stepped up and have offered their time to us. And so that second round has or will be finally approved, I believe, at our next council meeting, Jamie. It's on the agenda to formalize that plan there, but that's the good news in terms of what we've been doing locally for economic development in terms of supporting our businesses.
Thank you so much. And that kind of leads us to this next question for the city manager to give us maybe a brief overview of the fiscal outlook of the city. If you could discuss that, please.
Sure. So we took a very proactive approach to budgeting when the pandemic hit. You may remember what
Alexa, stop.
looks like we have some crosstalk here. Chloe, can you mute? So we took a really proactive approach to budgeting in the city when the pandemic hit. You may remember what things were like last March, April, May. It's hard to even, I mean, it's sort of strange to think back, but it's like the world shut down. It was so quiet. The roads were empty. Everyone was sheltering in place, staying at home. And that's when we were generating our budget for this year. Mayor Brooks mentioned earlier, we had to cut about 24% of our budget out at that point. And we really took almost every discretionary bit of expenditure that we possibly could out of our budget to make sure that we were keeping the city on a strong fiscal position. Since that time, obviously, economically, things have improved significantly. You know, the travel industry, the hotels are doing quite well. In addition, sales tax has done quite well in addition to that. So our fiscal picture has brightened considerably since last April, May, when we were adopting our budget. We have been very judicious about adding back in positions in the city. We want to make sure that we're actually getting all the way there in terms of economic recovery before we start committing to long-term expenditures. But at this point, the city is in a pretty good spot. Just looking at some brand new sales tax data today for the first quarter of this year, the Christmas period. October, November, December period, and the numbers look like they're coming in pretty strong. So we're doing okay in Capitola. I know other cities are still challenged by the coronavirus and the pandemic. In Capitola right now, I think we're in a pretty decent position looking ahead. And what we just need is we need to get ourselves beyond the pandemic and really start to grow our economy again.
And with all that optimism, there also has been some really proactive steps that the council has made as well. You know, I hope that we do see the light at the end of the tunnel. But what city council did is we've decided to do a set aside, and I think we landed on 500,000 or 600,000. I can't remember. $600,000 set aside for COVID relief. So if anything does happen again, or we have to shut down again, then the city can use those dollars to support any of those outcomes that may occur because of the pandemic. So it's just you know, now that we know that this sort of stuff could happen, and does come in ebb and flow, that we have a plan, and that just makes us feel a little bit more secure about moving forward or planning for the future. Because I'm always really hesitant in doing that if we don't have a fund to support us. So I'm just really happy that council moved that forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mayor Brooks's point is well taken. You know, the reality is that there are some cities that are really struggling around the state. And I think, you know, one of the things that we were able to do in Capitola is we confronted the issue early. We took action. I think that in any kind of disaster type situation, that's really what's required in my experience as a city manager is the willingness to make difficult decisions. And that has put Capitola, I think, in a stronger position than many other areas. And as Mayor Brooks indicated, you know, we did set aside an extra so we got hit in the last quarter of last year when the pandemic started. I think it was almost $1.5 million hit that we took in that quarter alone. So, you know, we got our budget quickly back in order. We did take a hit. We did end up using a lot of fund balance and unallocated cash reserves at that point to cover that. But then we've also set aside the $600,000, which provides us with more of a cushion so that if we do end up in that same situation, the impacts are less severe.
Thank you so much. And that is good news. But moving on to something a little different, maybe Mayor Brooks, you could speak a little bit about the parks and recreation updates programs that our recreation division has been able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. If any of you know me, one of the things that's really near and dear to my heart is supporting families and their children in our community. One of the unique characteristics, one of the unique attributes of Capitola that we've been able to do in the city is pass what I call a dedicated children's fund. So we receive funding through a TOT tax, or transient occupancy tax. So meaning anytime somebody stays in one of our hotels, we get a little bit of that money through the TOT tax. And when we get that money, a piece of it goes to our businesses, and they get to use the money for planning and marketing and events and so forth. And then another piece of it goes to a dedicated children's fund. And one of the things that I find really important is, like, when we have to do things like have discretionary cuts and cutting different programming, we cannot, because it's passed by the voters, we cannot cut the dedicated children's fund portion of it. It may go down if folks don't stay in the hotels, but it's still always there to use. And the more people stay, the more that pot of money grows. And one of our priorities that was established last year was to use some of that funding to support our Parks and Rec department, which made perfect sense, right? We want to see our Parks and Rec department grow more than what we've known from the past, which was a couple of classes here and there, our junior guards and so forth. But even more exciting is that they've expanded even more as an outcome of the current pandemic. The Parks and Rec department started an out of school program. We were one of the first cities to kickstart a program to support essential workers and their children. And so this program, thanks to the Santa Cruz County, who has supplemented some of the funding, or their own funding, they've given us some of their money to offset the costs of registration fees. So we've been able to run this really robust program as students have been, or as schools have been closed. There is still some availability. There are some current spaces available in our out of school program. And anyone who is on CalWorks, they actually, there are some spaces held for them. So if you know of anybody who's still looking for childcare, this is a great opportunity for them to tap into. The program's phenomenal. There's actually one class right across the street from me, and I get to see all the kids play on a regular basis, and they are provided a snack, and there's some school support there too. And I'm just so proud of our director for running such a great program. The other exciting thing that council just wrapped up, and Jamie, you'll have to fill the rest in for me, but we just completed the contract with the fire department for our junior guard training program. And so this allows our lifeguards to be trained by Central Fire so that they can in turn run our junior guard program. I just checked in with Nikki, our director, and she said that junior guard is currently planned to operate under the same COVID modifications as we did last summer. They will offer a 2-week-long session for a total of 4 sessions in the summer, beginning on June 14th. Different from last year, they are planning to offer an AM and PM block. So for folks like me who couldn't get up early enough to get my kid out there at 8 a.m., there will be a PM block there. So that's also good news because that doubles the capacity. They're going to be delaying registration to late April in hopes that we'll get updated guidance from the state or the county that might allow for some more positive changes and maybe a bigger program. And Camp Capitola will also operate as it did last summer with the same hopes. So also on March 6th, the city will be hosting the second phase of the Reflections of 2020 art contest with a public display at the bandstand at the Esplanade. The public is encouraged to participate in this COVID modified, socially distanced event and vote for their choice of prize winners. So keep an eye out on that. More information will be on the website. And then lastly, I'm so excited. I just found out, and I thought I might have seen Carrie on here from our chamber, but I just heard that in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, the city is hosting an Easter egg scavenger hunt. And obviously it won't be like years past where thousands of people were on the beach. But participating businesses will hide paper laminated eggs for youth participants to find and record on a little scavenger hunt sheet. And then the scavenger hunt record sheets will be available to print out from our website, or you can pick them up at the community center, and there will be prizes associated. And that again starts March 21st to April 2nd. So lots going on in our Parks and Rec department, and I'm just so happy to be part of it and to even have my kiddo participate. And hats off to our amazing Parks and Rec department who just really believe in the same things I do in terms of really supporting families and our kids here in our community.
That's fantastic. That's really exciting. And as you mentioned, more information about all those events can be found on the city's website. So I think, unless City Manager, you have anything to add? Okay, I believe we've come to the end of our prepared questions. So I want to turn to those that are in the meeting via Zoom, and anyone who may be watching on Facebook Live. If you have any questions, this will open the Q&A period. So please type your questions in the chat and I'll moderate those. I don't see any right now, so we might just wait a second to see if anyone sends in a question. And also here, someone has a question. I'll wait to see what it is. And perhaps City Manager and Mayor Brooks, if you have any other topics you wanted to just briefly mention, now would also be a good time.
Yeah, as folks think about their questions, I just wanted also to thank our City Manager, Jamie. He touched on how proactive and how hard the city worked in in financial planning during the pandemic. And as we reach almost a year from when it all went down, I just really appreciate all that you've done and all the hard work you put into into planning for our city and allowing us to be able to say today that we're in a better spot than other cities. It's hats off to you. So I just wanted to commend you for all of your work and our staff's work and time. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. It has been a unique period of time, I think, for everybody in Capitola, and certainly in City Hall is no exception. So, it's been great working with the council, and I've appreciated and certainly learned a lot this last 12 months. I just hope that I never have to put this experience of managing a city through a pandemic to use again in my career.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And also, I just want to let everybody know that our meetings, our city council meetings, are open to the public. And one of the things I ask of all community members is if you can't attend a city council member or meeting, but really have questions or really want to just offer some insight or perspective, feel free to email us, and maybe Chloe can put the council's email down in the chat for everybody.
Absolutely.
This information gets sent directly to all city council members. And so if you see an agenda item that you just want to offer some input but can't make the meeting, feel free to email us. Generally speaking, folks only show up if it's not good stuff. So we also welcome comments and just insight for items. And I see that Chloe also, she put it on the chat. So perfect.
Yes.
Thank you, Chloe, for doing that.
Absolutely.
Our next meeting is on February 25th. So that's Thursday at 7 p.m. And like I mentioned, we'll be talking about council priorities and what we want to focus on this year. Unfortunately, last year when we set those priorities, we didn't get very far. That was something that we set our priorities and then boom, the pandemic happened. So as we revisit what our goals and our intents are, or our intentions are for this year, you'll be able to learn more about that during our meeting. Chloe, any questions?
Yes, so I just wanted to bring one question to your attention. You briefly mentioned this earlier when we were discussing the park project at the Wristband property. Someone is curious, if the grant is not received, will the project move forward? City manager, maybe you could speak to that point. And also, is there any noise abatement planned since it's a loud location?
Sure, I can touch on that. So at the end of the day, right now, the project, I want to say the project is short about $200,000 of funding. That's ballpark the figure. So if we don't get the Prop 68 grant, we will be about $200,000 short on the project. So then what it comes down to is the city council allocating the funding for the project. There's a number of different alternatives we can look at. I am hopeful that we are going to close out the library project with a surplus of funding, which would bring some resources that we could either put into the Wristband or put into another project in the area. That'll be a council decision, and they're going to have to weigh the pros and cons of that. But I think that at the end of the day, I think there is a lot of energy around completing the Wristband project. It's been a long time coming. And so I think that I suspect that there's going to be a strong council consensus to find the money somewhere else in the budget if the grant doesn't come through. There was another piece of the question about the wall. So actually, we're actually doing a little bit of the opposite with the wall. The historic wall was put in to kind of shield Henry Wristband's house from the road. But one of the things that park designers talk a lot about is creating public spaces that feel open and visually accessible. They become more welcoming than sort of hidden places that people can't see into, where people are concerned about activities that they can't see maybe taking place. So we're actually going to be taking the wall down to about thigh high in parts. We're going to maintain kind of the historic entry through the wall to try to create more visual access into the space. Now, if you go further down into the property, it's definitely quieter down there. So you just have the advantage of topography as you move down the property to get into quieter spaces in the park. Do you
Thank
have
you.
anything to add, Mayor Brooks?
No, that's perfect. I asked the same question during city council of the what if, and I think you touched on that perfect, Jamie. Chloe, I see some other just kind of comments about, the engineering piece of it and foot traffic and speeding and I think all of those are potential CIP projects. Jamie, did you see those questions, or Chloe, do you want to?
Just some general concern. There will be increased foot traffic with the library, yay, and the park. And just wondering about Claire's and if there'll be any, mention of that or if staff will be looking into that.
Do you want to talk about the Claire's Light project, Mayor Brooks?
No, I do
Okay.
not. I'll leave that one to you.
Sure. So a couple things. We are looking at some of these things. Number one is the city council funded. So the city has said that we were going to redo Claire's for like 15 years. That was supposed to be in a condition on the original Wristband public-private hotel partnership project that never got built. We sought a federal grant several years ago that we were unsuccessful for to fund the reconstruction of Claire's. It has been a bear, and that project needs to be done. That being said, it's very expensive and we don't necessarily have the money. But what the council did do last year was put aside funding for what we called Claire's Light, which was intended to put some safe crosswalks in on Claire's, and maybe a few mechanisms to slow down the traffic on Claire's. So we're getting very near to a design for that project, and included with that project is kind of enhancing the pedestrian crosswalk across Wharf Road, connecting the library with the park. So that is a project that's in the works. In addition, on Wharf Road, we also have plans for one of the flashing solar speed light, speed display things. Amazingly, they do slow people down. They're relatively inexpensive, and when you do the speed surveys before and after, you'll see a couple mile-an-hour decrease associated with those speed signs. And they also do it in a way. A lot of evidence shows that the speed bumps, particularly when you're dealing with a street like an arterial or a stop sign, often people will suggest, Jamie, why don't you just put a stop sign in that arterial, or why don't you just put a speed bump? That tends to have the opposite effect that you'd think, and that it can irritate drivers a lot. If they don't feel like there's a stop sign that's really warranted, they tend to roll them, and then they tend to accelerate more quickly than they would otherwise away from them. So what I've experienced in my career is the most effective way to slow people down is those flashing speed signs. Also having, police officers out there with radar guns, that tends to work as well. So yes, we're working on some of those things. Yes, in the long term, we need to do the full Claire's project. The good news is that a smaller version of the Claire's project is coming soon.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. I share participant Anderson's same concerns that I've been pushing. When I ran in 2018, that's all I heard about. And so that was one of my goals and priorities that was set last year. And so I literally asked the question, I think last week to Jamie, and I'm happy to hear that we're moving forward with something soon.
Thank you both. I don't see any questions at the moment. I'm just going to verbally say one more time to our attendees, thank you so much for attending, by the way. If you have any questions, please, I'm seeing something here similar just about Claire's. So wonderful that we talked about that a little bit. Any other questions about any other topics? Feel free to type them here. Otherwise, I'm going to turn to our mayor and city manager for closing remarks.
Yeah, I just have an announcement. So today's event is part of a mayor's town hall series that I've put together. So our next mayor's town hall will be with our new fire chief Walbridge on March 16th at 6 p.m. Then following that on April 12th at 6 p.m. will be with First District County Supervisor Manu Cohen. And then on March 11th at 6 p.m. will be Mayor's Town Hall with Kaiser's Sam Bajaj, their Chief Operating Officer. And then lastly, on June 16th, 15th at 6 p.m., we'll be having all four mayors joint town hall meeting where all three other mayors will be there to talk. There was a recent one with the chamber, with Santa Cruz Chamber, and we're going to be just dovetailing off of that one and answering questions and giving some updates in June, and hopefully with an announcement of a collaborative summer event at that time. So I'm just really excited about the series. Again, I think that this is just a way for us to get information out to you, for you as voters to learn about what's going on in the community. And as Chloe said, or excuse me, as I said, you can email us or email all of City Council, or if you want to speak to me directly, you can email me. And I think Chloe, if you don't mind putting my personal email or my council email down in the chat, that would be great. But I do appreciate everyone for being here tonight. The sun is almost down, so you get a few more minutes of light. Jamie, any last remarks?
Oh, I just want to thank Chloe for helping moderate the discussion tonight.
Absolutely.
Mayor Brooks for helping put this on, for organizing it, and everybody for participating. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Thank
Good night.
you. Goodbye, everyone.